Hello, everyday leaders. Today is Thursday. It's July 8th. And I told you the speaker series was going to be amazing this year. And today we have Steve Sullivan joining us. Steve Sullivan is a great friend of mine from a different platform, from LinkedIn. And the reason that we got connected, first of all, was because of a challenge. Okay, so you know my why is challenge. So I don't have to say anymore. But
Good.
we did a 30 days of video challenge with Rob Howes and Wilton Rogers, and it was so much fun. And I met this amazing guy named Steve Sullivan. And Steve, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but it's just been amazing to know you these last few months. And you said, I want to teach the group about StrengthsFinder. And that's amazing to me. So thank you for joining us and take it away. You've got the
Oh,
floor.
thank you, Melanie, so much. And it is amazing the connections that occur through social media and where they lead. And I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk about strengths. You're going to need to moderate me. I'll tell you that up front because I could talk about strengths all day. I love what strengths tell us about ourselves and our style of leadership, in our choices that we make, and even in the relationships that we build. They're very powerful if you know your strengths and you delve into them. Some people just take the Strength Finder test and they get their top five and they say, okay, it's nice to know that I'm an achiever or a ranger or an individualization person. And that's the end of it. you know, they might look a little bit as to what it is, but they don't get the value of what those strengths mean to you as a person and how you're unique. I mean, for somebody to have the same top five strengths you have, Gallup has estimated that to be 1 in 33 million.
Wow.
So in the United States, we have about 330 million people. So that means maybe 10 or 11 people might have the same strengths. But one of the things that I do is I'm a UMAP coach. And what is UMAP? It's a self-discovery process to learn about yourself and to enable you to leverage that knowledge about yourself in various ways, whether that's leadership, job searching, branding. I've got one UMAP coach that uses it for fitness training because as we talk about the strengths today, there are relating or people facing strengths, and then there's inward facing strengths. And so, in terms of fitness, people who fall in that relating facing strengths, they tend to do better with group programs like a yoga class or an aqua class than they do individually going to the gym and trying to pump iron or swim. But those people who are inward focused, oftentimes they have a specific goal they want to reach for themselves. And so going and pumping iron or doing things, individual activities, maybe with a little bit of coaching from the trainers, they're happy with that and they thrive in that environment. Where if you're a people facing person and you go, my guess is maybe you'll go 2 times and then give up and say, going to the gym is not for me. And it comes back to who you are as an individual, understanding that, and then leveraging it. And so that, from the UMAP standpoint, there's 4 things we like to look at. Strengths is the first pillar in that. Values. What are the values that motivate you as an individual? Preferred skills. All of us have preferred skills, and we have skills that we don't like to do. For example, I love to write, but I don't like to do budgeting. And while I could do budgeting as a leader and was fairly good at it, it was like a burnout thing. I couldn't get through budgeting fast enough. So there's those types of skills that we all have that we like to do and don't do. And if you're a financial person, maybe you love budgeting. Because that's you as an individual. And the 4th thing is personality. So if you heard about different personality tests. Myers-Briggs is a very detailed one. The DISC is another. There's colors going around these days. Typically, I use the Holland uh, scale for personality.
Mhm.
Uh, and with those four things, I can create or help you see you as a person, your uniqueness and your unique value. And we compile that all into a UMAP. So that is where I'm coming from today. Is I'm a UMAP coach, but we're going to focus on the strengths today. And in preparation for this, I asked Melanie what her 5 strengths were. And I was excited to find out you actually knew what they were. Some people are like, I don't know. And then it's like, okay, you need to go take the Gallup Strengthsfinder Assessment, because Gallup has put, actually, Donald Clifton, who came up with this, spent 30, 40 years looking at how people work in corporate environment and identified 34 different strengths and how they manifest in different ways in the work environment. And so when you understand what your strengths are and use them, you're going to be more fulfilled in what you're doing. You're going to be more successful in what you're doing. Oftentimes people evaluate themselves and they say, I'm not good at uh, writing or communications. And so I need to work on that. And what I tell people is, you do not need to work on the things that you're weak in. There is little value in that. You'll get better, yes, but the ROI is not there. But if you take your strength and figure out how to use it more and more, you will get a far greater return. And then with that knowledge of, okay, I don't have the communication strength, you can potentially look for somebody on your team that has that strength, who loves communications, and then tap that person to be the spokesperson or the presentation person for your group and the effort that's coming forth. So as we talk today, we're going to look at you individually, but I want people to know that that is like the beginning, the tip of the iceberg of what you can get. But when you take it to the team level, you get a whole nother level. That in working with somebody like me and doing that analysis and pulling together the report, you'll come away with far more concrete things that you can do to take advantage of that than you'll get from, okay, we took this personality test and she's blue, so that means she's more methodical, and he's red, so he's more boisterous or whatever, and nobody ever remembers their own sometimes, let alone their team members.
Mhm.
But when you start to see your strengths and embrace your strengths, now you start to wonder about other people's strengths and what they can bring to the table. And you say, hey, communications isn't my thing, so I'm going to find somebody. And I'll give you a good example. My business partner is Karen Markle. She has that communication strength. It's not in my top 5. I have to struggle with writing, with speaking, all those things. But she can do it so naturally, so beautifully. That's because it's an inherent strength in her. So that's a long introduction, right, Mel?
Hey, I wanted to type in here. I have the UMAP strengths, values. What was the third one? Because I think
Preferred
I was
skills
preferred skills. Okay,
and then personality.
great.
Those are the 4 things. So we are going to delve into you. Now, as I mentioned, the strengths are broken up into 4 different pillars. Pillar 1 is relating strengths. So that's, as it sounds, relational. Pillar two is influencing strengths. These tend to be strengths where people like to mobilize others. They're not so much as a doer as getting other people to do it. Then there's executing strengths. Those are the people who are doers, man. They love the aspects of tasks and completing them and doing things. And then there's the thinking strengths. And so those are those inward strengths that can come out in various different ways. If you have futuristic, you might be a strong visionary. If you have the learner strength like you do and I do, you might be a great teacher. And we'll talk about that. So as I look at your profile, you're more heavily weighted on the inward focus than you are on the people facing focus. That's just with the top 5. Now, I often tell people if they do the assessment to go ahead and buy the full 34 instead of just the 5, because the next 5 or your top 10 sometimes interchange with the top 5, and they can also give you another picture of yourself. Maybe if we looked at your top 10, Melanie, you'd be balanced. And by balance, I mean usually you have core strengths in 3 of these areas. And because of that, they help you, the strengths help balance each other in the process. But some people are like only executing, thinking, or they're only relating and influencing. And those people are strong on what they do. But then hopefully, if they understand their strengths, they'll understand what the other people can do and not try and change them to be like them, but to say, hey, I need somebody who can actually do and execute. I've got this great vision. Now I need to get it done. And oh, yeah, I'll give it to Steve because he's a thinker doer. He'll get it done. So that's what the strengths can do. All right, Melanie, your top 5 strengths, and I don't know if you gave them to me in the order that Gallup said on your report. Like number 1 is your learner strength. In the UMAP process, we usually brush aside the numbers and just say, okay, here's your top 5, and then we'll talk about within those strengths which strength or strengths, it could be 1 or 2, are drivers for you, that they really charge your engine to get up and do things. And then we'll look at the other strengths and say which ones are passenger strengths. They're things you're good at, that just like in a car, driver's going down the road, gets tired and needs to hand off to a passenger. You're able to then switch over and hand off, and you leverage that strength. And then there's what we call fuel strengths, strengths that just are in the background in everything you do. They may not be motivating strengths. They may not be something that you leverage, but they're just a part of who you are as an individual. And they help give the nuances to the strengths, because, just because you have learner and I have learner doesn't necessarily mean we're exactly the same. It means that, your learner in combination of these other things could be slightly different than my learning and my combination.
I love this because there's so many, I study all of these personality assessments, and this is what I love about what you're saying, is because this is kind of how we react, right? The strength finders is how we're going to naturally just react to everything in the world. And knowing this is so important because it helps you with other assessments that you've taken, or your experience in your life. You now can own your journey. And without knowing this, you kind of sometimes feel like you're looking for a billboard, or that somebody else is going to lay out your journey for you. So
Yes.
This is really, really important. So I'm sorry, but I had to add
No,
that.
that is awesome, because that is one of the benefits that we often tout towards parents with college kids or high school kids prepping for college is, if you put yourself back in that era, like, what am I going to do? Everybody's asking you, what are you going to do when you grow up? And when you go to school, what are you going to study? You get inundated with those types of questions, and you usually don't have a good answer for it.
Mhm.
But if they go through the Strengthsfinder assessment and they work with a coach who can help them see, here's where your strengths are, here's where your personality is, preferred skills, you're geared to be more fulfilled in this type of job than that type of job. And I've run into people who've come out of college. I talked to a guy not too long ago who went to a prestigious engineering school, learned computer programming, and programmed for 2 years. So you would think, hey, this guy is set. He's got valuable skills. He's going to make good money in IT, but he dropped out because he found out he was not a heads down type of person, which is typically your thinker doer. He was more of a relationship type of person. And so he struck off into a different career that enabled him to work with people more. And if he had known that before he went to college, he might have changed his studies. Maybe he would have focused on communication, journalism, um, something other than computer science. Uh, and so there's value in that for the young people to understand this. And in some ways, it might even help them with that question of, do I go to college or not? That is a big question today. I've raised 4 kids. My first two um, are in their 30s. My second two are in their 20s. And then with the first two, it's like, you guys got to go to college. The second two, I started to say, wow, college is getting so stinking expensive that unless you guys know, my son and daughter, unless you know the skill that you want to go pursue at college, I don't encourage you to go to college. And my daughter, my youngest, knew exactly. She's been a lover of the sea and marine creatures, so she's off doing marine biology. Going straight to college to a good school was great for her. My third son didn't know what he wanted to do, didn't really like school, even though he's a very bright guy, and he took a year off. And the one thing he learned during that year was that he didn't like working minimum wage jobs. He didn't like being managed by people who had high school degrees. He then said, okay, what can I do? And he set his mind towards computer programming, which he just graduated this year with computer programming. And so he's set to launch his career that way. So again, I'm deviating from you. Sorry.
But that's important, right? Because we all have these situations that we think about. Like, as soon as you take your own assessment, you're like, okay, so now how can I see other things differently? And that's really important for us to help be mentors for other people and guides. And like, hey, if there is something out there that people need to be aware of, it can really help you once you let yourself be vulnerable enough to understand how you are designed, what your unique journey is, what your unique purpose is. Like you said, Steve, we are both learners. However, we may do it differently. How we do learning may look completely different.
Exactly. And that is a great point towards parenting. Again, since I brought up kids, I have seen situations where parents are frustrated with their kids, and their kids are frustrated with their parents because the parents have a certain strength. Maybe they're achievers, which is one of your strengths. So achievers are often very task-oriented people. They have their list of tasks, they get it crossed off, they're happy. and they say, okay, that worked for me. I'm going to make sure my son, my daughter knows how to do this. And you push them creating task lists and you push them to work this task list, but
My
they
poor
don't have the
husband.
achiever strength. You know, they may have the adaptability strength, which means they like to go with the flow. They're very good about changing directions and doing different things. And one of the interesting things I often tell leaders who are parenting children is, if you look at the leadership material, adaptability has become one of those hot items for leaders, especially in our culture today and everything that's going on. So your daughter, son may not be an achiever like you, which you leverage to become a leader, but they have an equally valuable strength and adaptability that they could use to become the next generation of leaders. If you don't crush them, because I've talked to adults, like my business partner, for example, who has communications. Her whole childhood, she was told, you talk too much, you talk too much. And so by the time she got to high school, she started shutting up, not talking, not in a sense developing her communication strength. She suppressed it. And it caused her to feel very bad about herself. And only in the last few years that she's come to understand her strengths and that she has communication, can she now look back and say, okay, yeah, people were coming down on me. But if the parents had only knew that she had communication strength, they could have guided that
Mhm.
instead of suppressed it. And so that's, again, knowing your strengths isn't just important for work, it's important for your life in different ways. Okay, so back to learner.
But here's the thing, Steve. I didn't take my first Strengthsfinders assessment until I was in a corporate job that they brought a consultant in, like
Yes.
what you do, and said, hey, we're going to learn how to develop this team. We're going to learn how to structure. We were developing a sales training organization. And so this is what we did, right? We took this step next because we had to get all of the people to fit into the right places, to understand each other, and to be able to grow the team. So this was really critical at that point of what we were doing as developing in a company. Um, However, I brought it home and I gave it to my husband and it sat on his desk for 6 months. And he said, oh, I'll take that. I'm like, no, 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 you really should try to take it. I will, I will, I will. And he didn't. He's going to kill me for sharing this, but it's okay. But he did take it finally. And he came to me and he said, this is like a light bulb. And I said, well, what are your strengths? What's your number one strength? And for people that know Joe, they would be able to guess this because they know his why is trust. But his number one strength finder was empathy.
Okay.
And I thought that was so just telling of he didn't really ever own that until he took the strength finders and then he got it. It was like, yeah, that's why I care about my customers because I'm empathetic to what they need to learn and here's how I approach them. Right? Instead of saying he was first as an achiever, like, okay, my clients are going to have to check off of a list. They're only going to go and do it this way. It's going to be the right way. He's more sit down, be a consultant, understand. And because that comes from that strength of empathy. So when you know that, sometimes you're not in an environment where you are given the opportunity to be influenced to say these assessments can help you. So anyway, that's why I wanted to share
That
that.
is an awesome point, because many of us, if we look back over our life, once we learn the strengths, can say, oh, okay, that's why I made that career choice or that relationship choice. It taking assessment puts, in a sense, a name on what it is that's a part of you as an individual that has affected your life to date and will affect your life going forward.
Mhm. Remember that book a long time ago, back in the 80s, I guess, What Color is Your Parachute? And people used to take that to say, okay, what kind of career choice should I be in? And that's kind of one of those early assessments, right, with Myers-Briggs and those that really helped you kind of validate, oh, was I interested in a skill like accounting or being a doctor? What kind of things did I was I interested in at a deeper level? And what could I concentrate on, to have long-term effects? And so I think that was kind of what inspired a lot of people in the very beginning to say this was important, right? This was important, and you could have more fulfillment and reach your potential easier if you were able to identify these things. So, all right, I'll give you back
Yes,
the microphone.
definitely. It's your show. I'm here. I'm here to make you look good.
You're here to teach us. I want to
That's right.
learn today.
All right. Your first strength is learner, which we've mentioned. So, what does that mean? For most learners, that means they like to learn new things and they learn quickly. For some of them, it also means they enjoy sharing that knowledge with others through teaching. As a learner myself, when I saw that teaching part, I said, I'm not a teacher. I don't know if I really like teaching or not. But as I started to drill down on how learning helps me in mentoring people, I saw its value because, for example, if I'm trying to communicate a principle to somebody and they're not getting it, I don't just repeat the same thing I just said again and again and hope that it gets beaten into their heads. My learner strength allows me to say, okay, let's come at this another angle to help you understand it because I need you to understand it. So that's the power of the learner strength. Now, with every strength, there's what I call an Achilles heel. Uh, in other words, you can get tripped up by this strength if you use it too much or you let it run away on you. So the Achilles heel for learners is they can go down rabbit holes with their learning that is not relevant to the research that they're doing. And you can waste hours learning interesting facts that do not relate to what you're looking for. I know this is true of me. I've done that. I'll set out to try and get an answer to a question. And next thing I know, 2 hours later, I've learned about X, Y, and Z, and it has nothing to do with the question I needed to answer.
You're watching cats on YouTube.
No, I'm not that bad, but does any of this sound like you, Melanie?
Yeah, because part of it is when you said teacher, right? When I took assessments and they said you should be a teacher, and I was like, no, 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 no. I can't sit in a room for 8 hours a day, the same school year after year. That is just not me. And so I went away from that for so long. And I knew I liked broadcasting and communications. And so I thought, well, could I teach that in school, right? Because that's all you thought. Well, if you're a teacher, that's what you have to do. And then when I got into my careers, I thought I'm always in marketing, I'm always teaching clients, I'm always creating structure and programs for people. So that was kind of like, aha, that is true about me, right? And when I like to do the research, it's I want to find out more because I'm not one to take a template and just use it. I want to create more value. So that's how I kind of approach it in, okay, I see this, but I see it differently. My why is challenge. So for me, I take all of this and say, that totally validates who I am and how I show up because I don't just want to say, great, you have a problem with this, go read this book. I'll say, you can try this, you can try this, you can try an audio podcast. There's lots of different ways that you can learn. So that's for me, I want to give the depth of how someone can access growth, personal growth, not just a one-way ticket.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Now, in terms of application of this strength, I'm going to talk about it in terms of how does being a learner affect your leadership, since this is all about leadership, right? Um, and not you, I could talk about how it might affect your relationships Um, there are so many different ways to take this strength, but we're going to focus on leadership. So having the learner's strength means that you can go into new situations and get up to speed quickly, learning potentially technology processes or the people dynamics to allow you to get up and running fast. You may be more inclined to mentor or develop your staff to take on greater responsibilities as a leader because you've learned as a leader and you want to pass that on. You need to guard, though, against the joy of learning distracting you from focusing on results. What are the questions that you need answers to, and try and limit yourself to getting those answered and not being easily swayed by other things. Does any of that sound like you?
Mhm.
All right.
I think that's why I enjoy consulting, helping companies, helping organizations, because you see things that they really can't see, right? When you're not on the inside of something, you're able to assess things quickly. You can learn their processes fast, and then you can develop a plan with them
Mhm.
pretty quickly. Uh, and then you think like, can't everybody else do this? Right? But again, it's your gift. And when you say this compilation of your top five, I look at mine and I can't wait to go through these because it's really true. You just naturally show up this way, and that's how you need to understand so that you can communicate what you do for people. And it makes the world a little bit easier to live in, right?
Yes, and especially some people find a lot of value in learning the Achilles heels to their strength because their truth is we're all blind to those, really, but they do show up. And your next strength is achiever, and achievers are diligent workers, often goal oriented, and they usually love task lists because they see that as a tool to help them stay on track to meet the goal that they've set. And some that are really proficient on this, they have their whole year mapped out. Each quarter here's what I'm going to do for each quarter. Here's what it's going to take. And yeah, it's achiever strength coming through that enables them to get results. Now, the Achilles heel to this is you tend to put work and task before people. And I see this a lot with leaders because they often have the achiever. And because of the achiever, they've risen up through the ranks as they've been successful. But if you talk about their home life, sometimes their home life is a total mess because without them realizing it, they put aside the important people in their life to get stuff done. And in working with one client, a young man who's in his 30s, he was just starting his career, he's being successful, he was an achiever. And I talked to him about this, and he said, "Oh no, that's not me. I love people. I love being with people." And I said, "Okay, well, this is the information. You reflect on it and watch and see if it shows up in your life." The next time we got together, he said, "Steve, the light bulb went on this weekend. I was at home working on this project that I really wanted to get done and do well at. And my 6-year-old daughter came up to me and she wanted me to play with her. And I brushed her aside." And I thought, oh, this is what Steve's talking about. And then he said, later I went to my wife and I asked her, I just learned this thing where I'm prone to maybe focus on tasks versus people and brush people aside. Do I do that often? And she said, "You do it all the time." So she was clued in. She could see that blind spot that he was missing. And so in our conversation, he said, "Steve, help me. I want to be number one at home and not just number one at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, you need to learn how to leverage your achiever strength towards relationships. And this is how you can do it. You're very task oriented. On your task list today, do you have any relationship activities? No. I got this report I got to get done. I got this presentation I got to do. They're all business things that you would expect to be on a task list. And I said, okay, here's your assignment. You need to go find out what's important to your wife, to your children, and then put them in your task list. So if your wife is telling you, I really want you to take me out Friday night, we need a date night, you need to put that on your task list so that every time you're working through your task list, you see that and it reminds you, oh, I better call and make dinner reservations so I can take my wife out to our favorite restaurant and we can have a good time together. Or if your son is playing baseball and he has a game that he wants you to be at, you need to make sure it's on your task list. Okay, son's baseball game, 3 p.m. Thursday. And then as you work through your task, you can begin to say, okay, I need to get this done so I can be free to go be with my son. And then afterwards, I can get back online and work. Achievers can tend to be workaholics.
Yep. I agree. But what for me, it gives me the structure because I am unstructured. I am so unstructured. It's crazy because I'm so creative. I want to learn all the time. So I use that it helps me create challenging structures that I need to be successful. However, Joe will say, can I get on a discovery call so we can go spend time together? And that's the truth. I can't find any time open. And so we laugh about that. But even when we go to the sailboat, right? So we have had fun on the sailboat and we have it and we go to it to escape, but we'll find that I'm doing lives or I'm doing trainings on the sailboat because that's what I do. Like, I'm sorry, but I've already got this scheduled. And so I have found libraries up on the northern part of the state that I can go to if I need to do, a training or a coaching call or something. But it's because that's how I've kind of structured my life. And, so it doesn't always work, but you do have to be really cognizant that that achiever part is, it is just part of who you are, right? So you have to pay attention to that because, because the people in your life go, put the communication tools down, stop learning about that, like just be in the moment. And so that is a big, like, okay, Achilles heel, pay attention to that.
Yes, it definitely it's probably cost a lot of relationships, a lot of families. So balance that out with your other strengths.
I'm
How
trying.
does so
Joe, get on this call.
he'll rewatch this
Yeah.
and
Like,
say,
you told
"Oh
all my
man,
secrets.
that's my wife to the T."
Oh my
Okay,
God.
so how does being achiever affect your leadership and your leadership style? Well, you're going to be very good at goal-oriented focus on results. I mean, that's going to be where you set your eyes. You will keep your team, your people focused on what needs to get done to achieve that result. And you'll be very successful at it. But you need to guard against seeing people as wheels in your engine and neglecting the development of relationships. You can drive your teams for results such that it can lead you or your team to burnout because it's got to get this done, got to get this done. So again, how do you counter this if you have this in your life? So again, make relationship activities a part of your to-do list. Find out from the people that you love, what it is important to them, and get those important things on your to-do list
How
and
much
make
time do you
time
need?
for them. So Joe is going to love me after this.
Oh my goodness. No, this is so great. This is great stuff.
Okay, so your next strength is arranger. I also share that with you. Arrangers are people who like to take on a lot of different things, juggle things. And they're very good at when they encounter an obstacle to quickly find a way around it. They're not held back by obstacles very often. Um, they're because they can move the pieces. Now the Achilles heel to this is your frequent changes in directions can frustrate others trying to follow you.
Joe, get on this call. Uh-huh.
Yes. So how does an arranger affect leadership style? You're going to be very good at troubleshooting. You're going to be very good at handling multiple projects and situations well. Those things, you're not going to feel like, oh, I'm being crushed because I got 5 things. It's like, oh, no problem. You're just juggling. But you need to guard against confusing your team by jumping between priorities and potentially constantly reshuffling priorities because they'll get frustrated. It's like, yesterday you told me the report was the one thing I had to get done this week. Today you're telling me this presentation is the one thing I got to get done this week. Which is it?
This
So
sounds
you
like
have to
our
be,
house.
yeah.
That's hilarious. No, but you know what? That is true because Joe's why is trust, right? So what I am learning continuously about our relationship, 30 years, right? So you say, when you communicate, what is it that you need to be aware of? Because his why is trust. His strengths are empathy, futuristic. Like we are a good circle and we just need to know how to communicate for each other instead of for ourselves. And that's what helps us be able to accomplish things. But it is one of those like, aha, oh, I'm doing that again, and you go, okay. And he'll say, here's the visual. Um, you are like a circus clown with all these plates spinning and you just have these poles and you're just going from one thing to the other. And so, but for him it's like it breaks the trust, of now there goes my courage, my little lion of courage. Gotta put him back up there. But that's so true because if you recognize that, you can stop yourself and say, oh, wait a minute, this isn't the right time to introduce that. That's not the right conversation to have right now. We got to get this done first. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, to counter it, you've got to be clear on priorities when assigning tasks. It doesn't mean you can't assign multiple tasks, but you can't make every task a number one priority because you've lost sight as to what it means to prioritize because you're just juggling. And you can naturally flow to where that plate is about to fall. You naturally see it and you go spin it up again and you're able to make that movement, but people can't follow you in that situation. So as a leader, make sure you're clear on priorities if you've got this strength. Okay, individualization. That's like a tongue twister for me. I don't know why. That strength, people who have that appreciate differences in people. And they often look for something unique about that person. And they may, in a work environment, be looking to find the right job for a person. And that's important to you as an individual to find those things and learn those things about other people. I'll give you an example. When I meet with people, I wear this bolo tie It has a very special meaning to me. There's a very powerful story behind it. Most people just see it and say, okay, it's just there kind of thing. But I've found people with individualization will often ask a question about it where others will not, because they've identified, wow, this is unique. You don't see this very often, especially up here in the North. Maybe if you're in the Southwest, you'd see it more. So they're able to find those things. And because they're able to find those things about people, they often build strong relationships with people. Now, the Achilles heel to this is you can often make decisions based on an individual's need versus the group's need. How does individualization affect your leadership? As I mentioned, you tend to build strong relationships through appreciating who the individual is and not just what they do. You're able to assign tasks to the right individual for success because you understand who they are. But you need to guard against a micro view of your team versus a macro view of your team. In other words, what does the team need to accomplish versus each individual? And make sure that, to counter this, you're developing a greater vision that encompasses the whole team, that then you can break down into the smaller pieces. Sound like you or
Yep,
parts of it? Yep.
absolutely. That's why I love coaching. I think for a lot of this is figuring out what makes someone tick individually and helping them really start to assess that and understanding that, again, there's not a cookie cutter, right? It's not a cookie cutter solution. There's not a cookie cutter way to live your life, and that's okay. And I think I love that strength because it is valued and it is important to me. So,
Great.
mhm.
All right. Your last strength of the top 5 is self-assurance, which is not one. It's in terms of looking at the number of people who come up with self-assurance, it's in the lower percentile. So it's more rare. But people who have this have a strong belief in themselves and are often willing to take risks because of their confidence that they can be successful.
Mm.
The Achilles heel is you can act in a self-sufficient manner in a way that excludes allowing others to help you. So how does this, if you have this, how does this affect your leadership? You will see opportunities and want to pursue them. You might be a great visionary because you've got self-assurance. You can also work independently. What you need to guard against, though, is and I can do it versus I need others to help me. Be careful not to consider yourself more highly than others. Like, I can do it alone. What do others have that they can contribute that I can't do already?
Mhm.
That self-sufficiency can trip you up. And to counter that, you need to learn to ask for help and allow others to contribute to the work. And if you do that, you're going to find that oftentimes those contributions magnify what you're doing and take it to another level. Does that sound like you?
Yep. Completely. Completely. And I think a lot of it has to do with experience, right? So as you get older, I mean, you may realize that you have these strengths. And we have a great question from Bonnie here in the chat. She says, "Can your strengths change?" Because I feel like when we talk about this, this is my makeup. This is why I have been very consistent in my life. And I say living like an open book. I haven't changed who I am or what I believe or what I stand for. Like, oh, what was that day when everything else changed? That really isn't my story. I've just been really consistent. And because I have these strengths, I feel like now, um, that's why I've wanted to learn. I'm really wanting to add value for other people. And then, but these Achilles heels are really important because if you do start to do something and really learn about it in a task, I can see how you could like sit in a room and just want to learn about everything, think that you can design something on your own and really kind of get stuck in life instead of figuring out tasks that are going to include you with other people to have you build other programs with other people with different levels using resources. And that's like the growth part, right? And so staying stuck or growing is the choice. And so being able to assess those and be accountable to that growth mindset, that's what's going to help you become better in your life. And so this has been awesome. So Bonnie's question is, let's get it right here in the chat. She says, "Can you do your strengths change?" Can you read that in there in the chat?
Yeah, I can get, that's a great question. People often ask that. And what we've found in working with people with strengths is there is strengths that seem to stay with you. If you take the assessment over and over again, your top 5 might change, but usually not drastically. I'll give you an example. Well, I think when I first took this like 7 years ago in a corporate environment, uh, I had 5 strengths. And then when I was doing my UMAP uh, coaching training, I took it again and I compared the two and I found out 3 of those top 5 were still the same and 2 of them had changed. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. But what I learned is your strengths can change based on the role that you're in, because the role that you're in may require something different of you. So for example, one of the strengths I had 7 years ago was analytical. That was considered my number one strength because I was a leader in IT. And what do you do in IT? You're constantly building solutions, evaluating systems, problem solving. It requires a great deal of analytical skill. But in the last 4 years, since I've been outside the corporate world, I've been relating to people so much that I don't use the analytical skill that much. And it fell all the way down to number 11 in my list. I was like, what? I value that skill, but it made sense to me that because the role that I'm in doesn't require that skill, that it's shifting down, and that some of the other things that I need to do what I'm doing is shifting up. So that's why, again, I say get the full report, because that top 10, you might find some of those changing over time, depending on the role that you're in. Because I know one of the top 5 I had 7 years ago, I think was belief. And it's like number 6 when I look at the top 10. So it didn't fall very far, but it wasn't in that magical top 5. But again, you can look at the top 10 and you might pull out and use any one of those strengths given, based on a situation.
So, did that answer your question, Bonnie? Yes. Okay. So I asked Jody because I know she had pulled out her strengths. And so her in the chat here, individualization, strategic, woo, communication, and connectedness.
She is a people facing person for sure. I think
Yep.
I think there's, I could be wrong, but I think there's 4 of those are relating strengths and one of them is influencing. Um, uh, so yes, you love working with people. If you're not working with people, if you're doing bookkeeping, you're probably not happy. You're probably miserable. Um, and that's why some people, they'll pursue a certain career and find that they hate it. because it doesn't, maybe they did it because their dad was an accountant, and uh, now they're in it, but they don't have the strengths that he had potentially to love doing accounting. So it's important to know your own strengths and then how to leverage them. Now, getting back to you, Melanie, of those 5 strengths, if you had to pick one that you think shows up in your life more than any other, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Um, I think I hate to say arranger. Um, I think arranger and learner are the two,
Okay, so those may be.
or individualization. um,
Yeah, and what we would do is, if we had more time, is I would drill down a little bit more, maybe ask you some specific questions, and then help you identify and say, okay, yeah, truly, what motivates me, what I try and do daily, or what I see coming out of me daily is learning,
mhm,
and so that may be your driving strength. But over here are these other 2 strong strengths, arrange or individualization. So maybe those are your passenger strengths. And then achiever and self-assurance are more like the fuel. They're always in the background. I would love the way you said achiever helps you have structure.
yep.
And so that type of statement tells me it's probably more of a fuel guiding the other strengths than it is a primary, driving strength.
Mhm. Because when I learned that my why was challenge and I thought it was contribute. And so from that, that kind of an assessment, I thought, well, I always want to show up and add value, but it's because I want to challenge the status quo. Because now when I take it back to learning my strengths, and this is what I really teach is learning your strengths helps you understand how you show up, right? That's how you're kind of reacting. So when I say I challenge everything in my thinking that I do because I want to challenge my learning, I want to achieve great things for myself and my clients. I want to be able to help individualize a course or a plan for them. All of these make sense to me, and I arrange it in a session or a situation that makes sense, for them to be able to achieve it as well. And that's where I get my joy. That's what gives
Yes,
me my joy in the world. And so this to me just is like the puzzle, right? The puzzle pieces that all fit together. And if you don't understand this, you always feel like there's a gap or there's a billboard or there's something that you are missing and your heart's not full or you're following somebody else's plan. And so this is like so critical. Like this is kind
it
of
is.
you got to
So
start
more
with all
people
this.
need to know it.
You got to start with this stuff because if you don't, you still feel like, well, I know this, but yet I don't really know how to apply it, right?
Mhm.
And that's what you're saying, like use the strength and not the gap. Like understand it so that you can use it in your life. Because like college students, kids that are going to school, people that have been on Zoom, I mean, my gosh, what a great thing to be able to teach them if you're showing up on camera differently than other people in your company or your community or your family. It's because you have different strengths. You may not be showing up like everybody else, but then you feel like you don't fit in, and that's okay. Right.
Yes.
But yeah, so this is man, this is important. All right, so Bonnie, you said your top three are learner in
Intellection and
oh,
input. I see
there
it.
you go. There you go.
So, Bonnie, those 3 tell me you're most likely inward facing, you're a thinker doer. Um, and, that might be a heads down type of role like accounting or programming. It could be if you have a strength over on the relational side, you might be a good project manager. Um, you can start to, once you learn these things, you can start to look at roles and say, yeah, this person would be good in this role. And when people get unhappy with what they're doing today, and they're like, I hate what I'm doing, but I don't know what to do. I say, you've got to go through this process because we can help you understand what you are engineered to love doing. And then we can help you try and find, okay, what different job roles might line up with who you are as an individual.
Hmm.
And then equally, a lot of people are unhappy at work. Maybe they like what they're doing, but their environment is not good. And that's where the values come in. The next pillar, when we look at values, people often who are unhappy at work, it's because their values are not being honored. And when they may not consciously know that, they just may see it and they may say, this isn't for me, I'm getting out of here. I know one guy who had integrity as one of his motivating values, and he was working for a boss who was a womanizer. He was always bragging about, you know, chasing this woman, chasing that woman, and he was a married guy. And um, this one guy with integrity was like, I can't stomach that this guy is so lacks so much integrity that I can't work with him. And he left the job. So again, going through the UMAP process and understanding the values can also help you understand how you're coming across to your team on a cultural level that can elevate them or demotivate them. And maybe even worst case, drive them to leave you. And then you're stuck hiring somebody new, retraining, all that you lose in every time there's turnover.
Wow. This has been awesome, Steve. This has been amazing because we need to know this stuff, right? From anything that you're learning, if you have been trained in other assessments. So if you know DISC, if you know Enneagram, if you know um, Myers-Briggs, any of these that you've learned, if you don't know Strength Finders, if you have been curious about it, if you know your strengths and you want more information, Steve, how can we get a hold of you? What can you put your information here in the chat so that we can have people reach out to you? Because I think this is just an
But yeah,
amazing
the
process.
best way to reach me is to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Most business people have a LinkedIn account, and so they can find me, and I can get that URL for you, Melanie, and you
Okay.
can include it in the notes or something like that.
Yep. That's perfect. Because I think there's a lot of people that I've been talking to as they're going back to their normal business life. And I was interviewing somebody for a different podcast last night, and Cindy Solomon is her name. And she has this Courageous Leadership Institute. She's amazing. And she was talking about these top, 500 companies that are really partnering with her for all kinds of different programs. But what she said was it was really sad to look at the way that people are going back to work. Because when in her companies that she's been working with for a long time, you would think they would take these learning strategies. Okay, we now know how to connect on Zoom virtually or Teams or whatever they've been using, and we would want to implement that to give us greater impact. A lot of these big companies are just kind of going back to the status quo.
Yes, and
And that's really difficult. Like we need to restructure, recaptivate, realign, reassess everything that we're doing because people's lives have changed.
they have changed. And when companies are so focused on local, being there on site locally, that limits their pool of employees. When you implement work from home programs, you now have the ability to potentially hire from anywhere in the world and get the best from anywhere in the world and not just locally. And I preached that message long before COVID, and I still can't get leaders to buy into that. Usually it comes back to a false sense that their employees are not working unless they can see them,
Mm.
which is not true. Usually, if they're your employee and they're responsible, they're going to work. And they might even actually work more, because when I took my team home long before COVID, I found that they were working more because they no longer had, I'm in Chicago, a 45-minute commute to work.
Mhm.
So instead of getting in the car and driving for 45 minutes, they were getting on the computer and starting to work. So there are a number of benefits to that. And I'm glad you're preaching that message, Melanie.
Yep. It's so important. But man, this has been awesome. I'm trying to look here in the Facebook chat. If you guys have any questions for Steve, if you want to just put hashtag replay in here, it's great that Bonnie and Jody were able to pop in the back room. And
Yes.
Bonnie, do you have any last minute questions for Steve? Nope.
No.
Okay. Steve, give us a closing leadership tip.
Closing leadership tip. One of the things I encourage leaders to do is to learn to be life-giving leaders. And what does that mean? Think about, have you ever tried to take a plant and put it in the desert? And what happens? It dies. The desert is not life-giving, but the leadership style that a lot of leaders have is no better than a desert. And if they learn how to become an oasis in the desert, they now can give life in a way that brings value to the people they work with and ultimately to the company. Because I will always say that investing in your people will lead to your greatest profits.
Absolutely. You've heard it here. Remember, all of these tips are for you guys to become better leaders in your life. And so we just so appreciate your time today, Steve. This has been really amazing. And thank you for going through my strengths. And if you have any of those, go back and listen to the positives, but also the Achilles heels and see, journal about those things that you may be doing that you need to change. You need to focus on just tweaking a little bit so that you can really focus on your strengths part. Focusing on your strengths is going to help you live a more fulfilled life. So if you don't know them, find them, grab this book, Strengthsfinder, and connect to Steve, and he can really take a deep dive with you one on one or come into a corporation and help you understand how to build your team. That's what this is all about, celebrating and lifting other leaders. And thank you for everything that you do, Steve. You're amazing. I'm so glad that we were connected through Rob and Wilton and just the rest of the LinkedIn family. And so appreciate you. Come back and keep us posted on what's going on in your life and what you're finding out about your strengths, will you?
I will.
All
I
right.
definitely will, because I do have a book coming out in September. So I may hit you up, Melanie, to come back to talk about that.
Yay! Absolutely. We would love to hear about that. People with knowledge that are pushing out energy so that you can connect deeper to the world. That's what it's about, learning and living and giving. So, man, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions for Steve, please hashtag replay and connect to him on LinkedIn. I will leave that link right here in the Facebook feed. And this will be pushed out on LinkedIn at some future point, and you will be able to find this in the YouTube library. So thanks again, Steve. Have a great rest of the week and enjoy your day. And remember, be everyday leaders in your life, and you can live your life with success. Thanks a lot.